Okay. The Messingkauf dialogues. The first night. A stage on which a stagehand is slowly dismantling the set. An actor, a dramaturge, and a philosopher are sitting on chairs or set pieces. The dramaturge reaches for a small basket put there by the stagehand and takes out bottles which he then uncorks. The actor pours the wine into glasses and hands it round.
All this dust. Makes it thirsty work sitting on stage. You'd better take a good swig.
Perhaps we should ask our friend here not to dismantle the set too quickly so as to keep the dust down.
I won't hurry. It's got to be done tonight, though. They're rehearsing tomorrow.
I hope it's all right for you here. Now, we could have used my office, but it's colder here. The cash customers get better treatment. And anyway, it'd mean sitting under the reproachful eyes of all those scripts I ought to have read. Besides, you, as a philosopher, rather like seeing behind the scenes, and you as an actor made it much of a public, but at least you can play to its seats. We can talk about the theatre and feel as if we were holding a discussion in front of an audience, as if we were performing a little play. And now and again, that will allow us to stage a small experiment or two to help clarify matters. So, let's make a start. And why not by asking our friend the philosopher what interests him about the theatre in the first place?
What interests me about your theatre is the fact you apply your art and your whole apparatus to imitating incidents that take place between people, with the result that one feels one is in the presence of real life. As I'm interested in the way people live together, I'm interested in your imitation of it too.
I get it. You want to find out about the world, we show what takes place there.
You haven't got it entirely, I think. Your remark lacks a certain uneasiness.
What am I supposed to be uneasy about? You say you're interested in the theatre because we show what goes on in the world, and that is what we do.
I said you dealt with imitations, and that they interest me insofar as they correspond to what's imitated. Because it's that I'm interested in, i.e. people's living together. In saying that, I was expecting you to look dubiously at me, and wonder whether anybody who approaches it in such a way could possibly be a good theatre-goer.
But why should that stop you being a good theatre-goer? We've given up on having gods and witches and ghosts and animals on the stage. During the last few decades, the theatre has done all it could to reflect real life. It made enormous sacrifices in its efforts to help social problems. It has shown how wrong it is that women should be treated as mere playthings, or that the individual's business conflicts should be carried into the home, turning marriages into battlefields, so that the money for educational refinement of rich man's children should come from other parents selling their children into immorality, and much, much more. And it has paid for such services to society by sacrificing virtually every element of poetry, and hasn't allowed itself to create a single major story fit to be compared with the classics.
Or a single major character.
What we do now, however, is banks, hospitals, oil fields, slums, millionaires, villas, cornfields, stock exchanges, the Vatican, arbours, country houses, factories, conference tables, in fact, the whole of reality as we know it. You get murders being committed, contracts being signed, divorces being made absolute, heroic deeds being performed, wars being decided on. You get dying, breeding, slandering, black marketing. In short, every possible facet of human life is enacted. We look at anything that is powerful and effective, we'll consider any new ideas. We long ago scrapped all rules about aesthetics. Plays can have 5 acts or 50. You can have 5 separate places shown on stage at once. The ending can be happy or unhappy. We've had plays where the audience could choose whatever ending it liked. On top of that, our acting can be naturalistic one night, stylized the next. Our actors can speak blank verse, gutter language, both equally well. Our musical comedies quite often turn out to be tragic. Our tragedies include songs. One night, the stage can show a house that is realistic down to the last detail, to the last stovepipe. Next, a weak market can be represented by a few coloured poems. Our clowns make the audience shed tears. Our tragedies reduce it to helpless laughter. With us, in other words, everything is possible. Should I add alas?
It seems to me a rather pessimistic way of putting it. You make it sound as if we weren't serious anymore. Let me tell you, we aren't just that thick slapstick merchants. We're hard-working, highly disciplined lot of people, trying to do their best. We have to be. because there's so much competition.
Our representations of real life were good enough to serve as models. The audience could study our subtlest inner moods and feelings. Our family interiors were exact replicas. Particular companies could spend 10 years as an ensemble so that one got representations, say, of a landowner's family. Each movement of each actor was authentic, and you could almost smell the scent of the rose garden. It used to amaze me how playwrights managed every time to discover some new inner sentiment for their characters, just when we were beginning to think we knew them all. No, we stuck at nothing, and the trouble was too much for us.
So what you're mainly concerned with is imitating incidents between people?
We couldn't exercise our art if we didn't. The only thing you might say is that our imitations are bad ones, in which case you'd be arguing that we are bad artists, because our art lies in giving imitations the hallmark of reality.
I'm not accusing you of that at all. I want to talk about your art, whether it's well done or badly. And when well done, it gives the hallmark of reality to imitation.
I can say without undue boasting, I hope that I can portray any action you might care to think of, however far-fetched you care to make it in such a way that you believe it without question. I'll show you the Emperor Napoleon, chewing nails, if you like, and I'll bet you'll find it absolutely natural.
Quite.
Excuse me, but you're sidetracking us, and there's no need to overdo it.
What do you mean sidetracking? I'm talking about art of acting.
I wouldn't call that sidetracking either. There's an account of some well-known exercises for actors designed to encourage natural acting, which includes the following drill. The actor places a cap on the floor and behaves as if it were a rat. This is supposed to teach him the art of inspiring belief.
A first-rate exercise? If we didn't master this art, or inspiring belief, how on earth could we get the spectator to look at a few flaps of canvas, or even a sign with some writing on it, and believe it's the scene of a Battle of Ypres he's seeing? Or at a mass or a few antiquated articles of clothing, and believe it's Hamlet? The greater our art, the less aids we need from reality. In order to construct a slice of life, it's true that we imitate events from real life, but there's more to it than that. To hell with incidents. What counts as our reason for imitating them?
Well, what is the reason?
Because we want to fill people with sensations and passions. To take them out of their everyday lives and its events. The events are simply the framework which we deploy our art, the springboard for us to take them from.
Exactly.
I don't like that exactly one little bit. You wouldn't be all that satisfied with those sensations and passions you're meant to be filled with, I suppose. You didn't mention that when you were explaining why you come to art theatre.
True enough. Sorry. I'll drink to your health.
I'd sooner drink to yours, if I may say so, because what we were going to talk about was how you could get satisfaction from the theatre, not how we could.
I trust he's not going to say we minds are stirring up his sluggish soul. All right, he may be more interested in what we're imitating. Yes, the events, than he is in us. But how are we going to imitate these events without calling on our sensations and passions? If we give a frigid performance, he'd just walk out. Anyway, one can't perform frigidly. Even events must stimulate us, so long as we're not entirely without feeling.
No, I've got nothing against feelings. I agree that feelings are necessary for representations. Imitations of events from people's social life are to be possible. Also that such imitations must stimulate feelings. The only thing that worries me is whether your feelings, more specifically your efforts to stimulate certain particular feelings, square with your imitations. You see, I'm afraid I must stick by my point that my main interest is in these events from real life. So let me stress once more that I feel I'm an intruder, an outsider in this building, with all its mysterious practical bits of apparatus. Like someone who's not come in to enjoy a sense of comfort and would have hesitation in generating discomfort, as he has come with a quite particular interest whose particularity cannot be overstressed. The particularity of my interest so strikes me that I can only compare myself with a man, say, who deals in scrap metal and goes up to a brass band to buy, not a trumpet, let's say, but simply brass. The trumpeter's trumpet is made of brass, but he'll hardly want to sell it as such. By its value as brass, there's so many ounces of brass. All the same, that's how I ransack your theatre, for events between people, such as you do more or less imitate, even if your imitations are for a very different purpose than my satisfaction. To put it in a nutshell, I'm looking for a way of getting incidents between people imitated for certain purposes. I've heard that you supply such imitations, and now I hope to find out if they're the kind of imitations I can use.
Actually, I'm beginning to feel a little of the same discomfort as you prophesied for yourself. Imitations such as we supply, as you so pithily put it, are naturally of a particular kind insofar as they're designed for a particular end. Now, you'll find this point discussed in Aristotle's Poetics. He defines tragedy as an imitative representation of a self-contained morally serious action of such and such duration in heightened speech, whose different varieties are employed separately, distributed amongst different parts, not narrated but performed by the persons taking part in it, simulating terror and pity, and therefore bringing about the purging of those moods. In other words, it's a matter of imitating your events from life, and the imitations are supposed to have specific effects on the soul. Since Aristotle wrote that, the theatre has gone through many transformations, but not on this point. One can only conclude that if it changed in this respect, it would no longer be theatre.
You don't think it feasible to distinguish your imitations from your purpose in making them?
Impossible.
But I need imitations of events from real life for my purposes. What can we do about it?
Imitations cut off from their purpose would not be theatre. Let me remind you of that.
Now, that needn't particularly matter. We could call the result something different. Theatre, for example. It would be like this. You'd just be artists whom I hired for an inartistic job. Finding yourself unable to get hold of anybody else who was skilled in the exact imitation of active human beings, I would hire you for my purposes.
And what are these mysterious purposes?
I'd hardly like to tell you. You'll probably think they're mundane and prosaic. I thought we might use your imitations for perfectly practical ends, simply in order to find out the best way to behave, you see. We could make them into something like physics, which deal with mechanical bodies, and so work out technology.
So it's scientific purposes you're after, but that's got nothing to do with art, you know.
Of course, that's why I only call it theatre.
All right. Let's have your ideas. There'll be something for us in them too. It might be a roundabout way of getting a few hints about how to manufacture good imitations. And that's always important to us. We know by experience that our representations are much more effective than when what we're representing isn't too unlikely. No one's going to sympathise with a jealous wife, for instance, if it's supposed that her husband is having an affair with her grandmother.
If I hire you, you can only hope to profit from such points as long as I don't lose you. I think the first thing for me to do is find out exactly how you're used to working, so that I can see what needs changing in your methods if I'm to get the right kind of imitations.
It may lead you to see that our imitations aren't all that unsuited to your purpose, even if we prepare them in an old-fashioned way. In fact, I don't see why people shouldn't get practical lessons from our theatre as well as everything else.
I ought to tell you that I have an insatiable curiosity about people. It's impossible for me to see and hear enough of them, the way they get along with each other, the way they develop friendships and enmities, sell onions, plan military campaigns, get married, make tweed suits, circulate forged banknotes, eat potatoes, observe the heavenly bodies, the way they cheat, favour, teach, exploit, respect, mutilate, support one another, the way they hold meetings, form societies, conduct intrigues. I always want to know why they embark on their undertakings, and my aim is to distinguish certain laws that will allow me to make predictions. I ask myself how I ought to behave in order to get through and enjoy as much happiness as possible, and of course this depends on how everyone else behaves, which makes me very interested in that too, and especially in any possibility of influencing.
Well, let's hope you get your pound of flesh off us.
Yes and no. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, if I may say so. I'm not entirely happy here.
Why's that? Don't we show you enough?
Oh, quite enough. That's not the matter.
Perhaps you see things that don't seem to you to be represented right.
I also see things that do seem to me to be represented right. I think the trouble is that I find it impossible to distinguish right from wrong with you. Let me finish describing myself. Besides, I've got another passion besides curiosity, that disputatiousness. I like carefully weighing the pros and cons of everything I see and sticking my oar in. There's a certain pleasurable doubt in me. I finger people's acts and utterances, just like a poor man fingering his loose change, and turn them over 10 times. And I don't think you people here leave elbow room for this doubt of mine. That's what it is.
Ha! The critic.
I have touched a sore point.
We don't mind intelligent criticism, we just don't get it.
That's all right. I understand. We'll always have to reckon with the criticism. Of some sort, anyway.
Don't seem very taken with my enthusiasm. But let me assure you that I wasn't meaning to run down your offers just now. I was only trying to explain the sense of unease that comes over me in your theatres and takes away a lot of the pleasure.
I hope you look inside yourself for the causes of that unease and don't just blame us.
Of course, I can give you encouraging reports too. We can clear the air a bit further because I'm much less concerned with the way in which you represent things. That's to say, with whether your representation is right or wrong, than the actual thing that you're imitating. Suppose you give me a good imitation of a murder. My passion for criticism will then force me to subject the murder itself and all its details to tests of utility, elegance, originality, and so on.
And you can't do that here?
No, you won't let me. It's something in the way you put on your imitations, even the best of them, and present them to me. Time was when I used to go to open-air performances and smoke during the play. As you know, a man smoking is in an attitude highly conducive to observation. He leans back, thinks his own thoughts, relaxes in his seat, enjoys everything from an assured position, is only half it.
Did it help you see any better?
No, my cigar went out.
Bravo! Double round of applause for the actor who managed to carry you away, and for yourself for not being such a wet fish.
Stop, I must protest. It didn't turn out as I expected. The experiment was a failure.
Just as well, my dear man, just as well.
I wasn't satisfied.
Shall I tell you how you could have been if those people on stage had been a bunch of incompetents who couldn't act?
I'm rather afraid you might be right.
What do you mean afraid?
Well, isn't it frightening? If I get harder to satisfy, the better you act. It sounds like a hopeless situation.
Stop patting him on the shoulder in that condescending way. It can make people contradict even the most sensible remarks.
Yes, you are rather a dictatorial character, aren't you? It feels as if you're always dictating when you're on stage too. I'm supposed to do what you want without getting a moment to consider whether I want the same as you.
There you are. Now he feels you go patting him on the shoulder in the theatre too. What did I tell you?
There could be something in this, don't you think? Look, a member of the audience says he feels he's being patted on the shoulder, being seen through, understood better than he understands himself, caught out in secret desires which are then satisfied. Isn't that rather gruesome?
Let's drop it. It's no good arguing if people can't keep their tempers. My hands are now in my pockets.
Whoever accused you of arguing, temper or no temper? You never argue on stage anyway. You provoke all sorts of passions, but a passion for an argument? Oh no. Indeed, you don't even satisfy it when it's there.
Don't answer too quickly. He's talking very much to the point.
Yes, his point though. Frankly, I've begun to wonder if he's really a good philosopher.
You ought to say why.
A philosopher thinks about things as they are. Here's art, so he thinks about it, and this, and that. And if he uses his loaf a bit, perhaps, he can explain why. If so, he's a philosopher.
I entirely agree. There are philosophers like that, and art.
What do you mean?
Well, art is this and that, and that's all.
Really? Is there some kind of other art then? Art that isn't this and that and isn't anything?
Take your time. I know you aren't used to taking your time, but just try.
Very well. I shall think. Is this how you do it?
No. Your muscles aren't relaxed enough. Let's start our thinking with a confession by me. I'm a philosopher who failed to use his loaf for your sort of philosophizing.
I offer you my bosom to weep on.
I'd rather use a lady's action, and preferably to laugh on rather than weep. But to get back to the philosopher and the loaf, for a few centuries now, while some philosophers have been making inventions and discoveries in the realm of nature, others have begun wondering whether they had the loaf to master and refute certain statements by the... What the heck? Hang on, I don't know. Sorry. While some philosophers have been making inventions and discoveries in the realm of nature, others have begun wondering whether they had the loaf to master and refute certain statements by the ecclesiastical and other authorities. These statements were to the effect that everything is rightly and legitimately as it is. They wore themselves out in a critique of reason. They truly hadn't enough in the way of loaves or any other nourishment to tackle such powerful institutions as the church. So, I have been trying to think how the general supply of loaves can be increased.
When I said use your loaf, I meant, of course, for thinking, not for eating.
Oh, there's a profound connection. The more loaves, the more loaves.
Empathy.
We've had images. Naturalism's images resulted in criticism of the real world.
Feeble criticism.
Well, what should we have done to make it stronger?
Those naturalistic images of yours were badly manufactured. The point of view you chose for your representations made genuine criticism impossible. People identified themselves with you and came to terms with the world. You were what you were, the world stayed as it was.
Oh, you can't say we're free from criticism. Such flops, such notices.
You get criticised when your attempted illusion failed. Just like the hypnotist who fails to bring off his hypnosis. The customer is criticising an apple that is a lemon.
So you think he ought to criticise the lemon?
That's it. But the lemon's got to be a lemon.
About ignorance.
Allow me to tell you that the millions who are in danger and misery have no idea what the causes of that danger and misery may be. There is, however, a considerable minority that has quite a good idea. They in turn have taught a considerable number of people a considerable amount about their persecutors' methods. Not so many can see how the persecutors are to be got rid of. The persecutors can only be got rid of once enough people understand the causes of their dangers and miseries, and the way things really happen, and how to get rid of the persecutors. So it's a question of communicating this understanding to as large a number of people as possible. It isn't easy, however one chooses to set about it. Today, this evening, I would like to discuss with you, theatre people, what you may be able to do. All of us have very vague ideas about our actions. Often we don't even know why we perform them. Science hasn't done much to combat prejudice in this matter. People suggest such dubious motives as greed, ambition, anger, jealousy, cowardice, and so on. If we look back at what has happened, we think we can make certain calculations, estimates of our position at the time, projections, recognition of obstacles outside our control. We didn't initiate these calculations, however. We just deduced them from our own actions of the time. We only dimly realise how dependent we are in every way in all our decisions. There's some sort of link-up between it all. We feel, but we don't know what. That's why most people take the price of bread, the lack of work, the declaration of war, as if they were phenomena of nature, earthquakes or floods. Phenomena like this seem at first only to affect certain sections of humanity, or to affect the individual only in certain sectors of his habits. It's only much later that normal, everyday life turns out to be abnormal, in a way that affects us all. Something's been forgotten. Something's gone wrong. Whole classes have their interests threatened without those classes ever having banded together to protect the interests they have in common. Because people nowadays live in huge communities on which they are wholly dependent, and because they live in several communities at a time, they have to go about everything in a roundabout way if they are ever to achieve anything. It may look as if their own decisions no longer play a part. The simple fact is that decisions have become more difficult. The spectator isn't going to learn anything from having an incident just happen. It won't be understood just by being seen.
You mean you want some kind of comment?
Or something in its portrayal that will be equivalent to comment, yes.
But what about learning from experience? You don't merely see things in the theatre, you share an experience. Is there any better way of learning?
We'll have to examine how people learn from experience without something equivalent to comment on being incorporated. To start with, there are certain factors that prevent one from learning or becoming any cleverer from experience. For instance, whether it changes in the situation that take place too gradually, imperceptibly, as we say, or if one's attention is distracted by other incidents happening at the same time, or if one looks for causes in incidents that weren't the causes, or if the person undergoing the experience has strong prejudices.
Surely there are experiences that would make him shed.
Only if he's thought about it, which may well bring him up against the obstacles I just mentioned.
But don't you learn best by doing things yourself?
The kind of experience that theatre communicates isn't doing things yourself. And it'd be quite wrong to treat each experience as an experiment and try to get everything out of it that an experiment can yield. There's a vast difference between experiment and experience.
Do me a favour, and don't give us an elaborate account of that difference. I can work it out for myself.
What about the transfer of direct sensations? For instance, when horror is aroused by horrible actions, or when one experiences horror and one's own is strengthened by it.
We're not concerned with the fact that horror can be aroused by horrible incidents in reproduction, except where the horror is strongly and infectiously expressed by a single individual, as happens in the theatre. In such cases, there are some relevant lessons to be learned from modern physiology. You know Pavlov's experiments with dogs.
Let's have it. Sounds like something factual for once.
Of course, this is only an example. People aren't dogs, even if you treat them as such in the theatre, as you'll see. Pavlov threw meat to dogs and rang a bell at the same time. He measured the dog's salivation on seeing the meat. Then he rang the bell without throwing the meat. His measurements showed that the dogs salivated just the same. They needed their saliva only to digest the meat, not to stand the bell ring. But that didn't stop it coming into their mouths.
And what's the relevance of that?
Your audience has experienced extremely rich, complex, many-sided incidents, comparable with those of Pavlov's dogs. Food plus bell ring. It might be that the desired reactions occurred in real-life situations, which only shared certain features of those that they've expressed with you, secondary features perhaps. In that case, you'd be making them ill, just like Pavlov and his dogs. But of course, this also happens in real life. People can experience real incidents and still go astray in this way. They've learnt a wrong lesson.
The philosopher's speech about our period.
Remember that we've met together in a dark period, when men's behaviour to one another is particularly horrible and the deadly activities of certain groups of people are shrouded in almost impenetrable darkness, so that much thought and much organisation is needed if behaviour of the social kind is to be dragged into the light. The vast oppression and exploitation of one man by another, the warlike slaughterings and peaceable degradations of every sort throughout our planet have come to seem pretty well natural to us. Many of us, for instance, find the exploitation that takes place between men just as natural as that by which we've mastered nature. Men being treated like the soil or like cattle. Countless people approach great wars like earthquakes, as if instead of human beings, natural forces lay behind them, against which the human race is powerless. Perhaps what seems most natural of all to us is the way we earn our living. The way one man sells another a cake of soap, a loaf of bread, or the strength of his body. We imagine that it's simply a free exchange of commodities, but you only have to look closely to see just what the fearful experiences of our daily life go to prove. That such exchanges don't merely take place between people, but are managed by specific people. The more we can squeeze out of nature by inventions and discoveries and improved organisation of labour, the more uncertain our existence seems to be. It's not we who lord it over things, it seems, but things which lord it over us. But that's only because some people make use of the things in order to lord it over others. We shall only be freed from the forces of nature when we are free of human force. Our knowledge of nature must be supplemented with a knowledge of human society if we are to use knowledge of nature in a human way.
Science. Third night fragment.
This notion of continually observing oneself and referring back to one's own experience can easily lead a man to alter the text. What's your view on that?
What does the Augsburger say?
Actors are usually very self-centered about amendments. They see nothing but their own parts. The result is that they not only answer questions, but alter questions in such a way that the answers are no longer valid. If such alterations are made collectively and with no less of a degree than interest and talent than has gone into the actual writing of the play, then it will be in the play's advantage. One shouldn't overlook the fact that it's not the play but the performance that's the real purpose of all one's efforts. Alterations demand a great deal of art, that's all.
That last sentence seems to me to define the limits well enough. I'd like also to point out that too great an inclination to make changes may make for a frivolous study of the text. But on the other hand, the possibility of alteration and the knowledge that this may be essential makes its study deeper.
The important thing is that if one is going to alter one must have the courage and the competence to alter enough. As we've seen, the Augsburger cuts his place up into a series of little independent planes so that the action progresses by jumps. He doesn't like scenes to slide imperceptibly into one another. So how does he cut them? And from what points of view? He does it in such a way that each individual scene can be given the title of historical or socio-political or anthropological.
Cheerful criticism.
One can understand people getting pleasure from sharing the characters' emotions and spiritually participating in their actions. But how are they supposed to get pleasure from criticising these things?
I've often found myself being depressed by taking part in your various heroes' actions and generally disgusted by having to share their emotions. On the other hand, I like playing around with your heroes. That's to say, it entertains me to imagine different ways of behaving and compare their actions with others that are equally possible.
But how else can they behave, being what they are and designed for what they are designed for? How can you conceive a different way of behaving for?
I can do it, and I can compare them with myself too, for that.
So exercising one's critical faculties isn't a purely intellectual business?
Of course not. You can't possibly confine criticism to the intellect. Feelings also play a part in the process, and it may be your particular job to organise criticism by means of feelings. Remember that criticism originates in crisis and reinforces it.
I agree. We need to know as much as possible in order to stage even the smallest scene. But then what?
Degrees of knowledge vary widely. There's knowledge in your dreams and premonitions, in your hopes and cares, in liking and suspicion. But above all, knowledge manifests itself in knowing better, i.e. in contradiction. There's your territory for you.
It's all got to be shown to the children. In other words, there's nothing audiences loathe more than being sent back to school.
Your schools must have been terrible ones to inspire such a loathing. But why should I be bothered about your bad schools? Get rid of them.
Nobody objects to a play having meaning, but it mustn't be continually thrust at you. The lesson has to be inobtrusive.
Believe me, people who want obtrusive lessons want no lessons at all. As for the meaning being thrust at you, that's another matter.
Well, we've done our best to study your various depositions for the making of the art of the theatre, just as instructive as science. You invited us to come and work in your theatre, which was supposed to be the scientific institute. Making art was supposed to be our object. To achieve what you want, however, we've had to throw out our entire art. Frankly, if you were to act as you wish, and with the aims you wish, we should be creating art just the same.
And that has occurred to me.
You've scrapped much of what's normally supposed to be needed for the exercise of art, yet it strikes me that what counted was your retention of one single point.
What?
What you call the ease of this work. The realisation that this game of preference, this cooking things up for the audience, can only be conducted in a cheerful, good-tempered mood, a mood where one's disposed for fun. You placed art just right when you pointed out the difference between the work of a man who's responsible for pushing 5 buttons on a machine and a man who juggles with 5 balls. And you linked this ease to extreme seriousness in one's attitude to one's social task.
What put me off most at the beginning was your insistence on working purely and solely with reason. Thinking is such a thin-blooded business, you see. It's fundamentally inhuman. Even if you argued that it was a distinguishing mark of the human animal, it'd be a mistake, because I'd say we're leaving out the animal part.
How do you feel now?
Oh. I come to think of it, thinking is so cold-blooded after all. There's no contradiction with feeling. And what I stimulate in the audience isn't only thoughts, but feelings. Now, I see thinking is just a way of behaving and behaving socially at that. It's something that the whole body takes part in with all of its senses.
I once saw a Russian play in which workers gave a gun to a violent criminal so that he could protect them against violence while they worked. The audience simultaneously wept and loved this. In the old-fashioned theatre, the hero used to be contrasted with a stock figure. Caricature is the means by which the empathetic kind of representation expresses criticism. The actor is criticising life, and the spectator identifies himself with his criticisms. Probably the epic theatre can only stage such caricatures when what it wants to show is the process of caricaturing. The caricatures then make their appearance like dancers in a masked ball scene. The gliding, fitting, transitory, but not transporting method of representation is furthermore needed because every utterance of every character has got to be made striking. And this means that the course, connection, development of all these utterances has got to be made striking too. Genuine understanding and criticism are only possible if the part and the whole and the varying relations between the part and the whole can be understood and criticised. People's utterances are bound to be contradictory, so we are bound to take in the whole contradiction. The actor doesn't need to put forward a fully elaborated character. He couldn't do it, and he doesn't have to. He's not only putting forward criticism of the matter in hand, but first and foremost, the matter itself. He doesn't need to have fully worked out opinions about everything he puts forward. He's drawing on a pool of things seen and experienced.
All the same, our theatre is a serious obstacle to your theatre, my friend. Take those abilities of ours, which the theatre has developed for its own ends. The utilisation is going to suffer from the fact that certain of our capacities are of little use to you, as well as those which you actually need. It's just as much a handicap that they should in some ways exceed your requirements as that they should fall short.
When do you exceed them?
You explained very clearly the difference between someone who sees and someone who looks critically. You suggested that the former must be replaced by the latter. Down with guessing, hurrah for knowing. Down with suspicion, hurrah for conviction. Down with feelings, hurrah for argument. Down with dreams, hurrah for plans. Down with yearning, hurrah for determination. But why aren't you all applauding?
I wasn't really being so definite about art's broad tasks. Certainly I was against the contrary attitude. Down with knowing, hurrah for guessing, and so on. I oppose the idea of keeping art as something strictly marginal. Slogans like these don't apply to the works of progressive classes in stirring times. But look at your own period. Look what much more artistic performances you get from works based on the attitudes I'm against. Guessing is far more artistically portrayed than knowing. Even where works do include clear ideas, it's on their unclear side that one finds the artistic element. I don't just mean that one looks for it there, but that one actually finds it.
You don't think there's an artistic form for knowing?
I'm afraid not. Why should I want to knock out the whole realm of guessing, dreaming and feeling? People do tackle social problems in these ways. Guessing and knowledge aren't opposites. Guessing can lead to knowledge, knowledge to guessing. Dreams can lead to plans, plans can merge into dreams. I yearn for something and set out, and I still yearn as I move. One thinks feelings and one feels thoughtfully. But there are also shortcuts and short circuits. There are stages where dreams don't turn into plans, guessing doesn't turn into knowledge, yearning doesn't get on the move. Those are bad periods for art. It becomes bad. The tension between guessing and knowledge from which art arises snaps. The field, as it were, loses its charge. At the moment, I'm not much interested in what comes of those artists who are plunged in mysticism. I'm more interested in those who turn impatiently away from planless dreaming and go on to a dreamless planning, to a corresponding empty plan.
I see. It is specifically we who are trying to serve the society that we belong to who have to measure all the dimensions of every sphere of human activity.
So, we're not just to show what we know.
We cut the actors.
Yeah, she's not here, so
we just cut over that.
Yeah. So just cut over it.
She was meant to be.
Why?
It's fine.
Okay, we'll just move on.
We'll speak to her later, but
We'll move on.
Where did we end up?
Oh, yeah, okay. So also,
page 30.
So we start from page 30. Okay.
remember that some things you don't know may be recognised by the audience.
Definition of art.
We've talked enough about the uses art can be put, about how it can be created, and what the creation of art depends on. And we've also created art during this night, so we can now risk a few cautious statements of an abstract kind about this peculiarly human capacity, trusting that they won't be applied abstractly, independently and purely on their own. Thus, we might perhaps say that art is skill in preparing reproductions of human beings' life together, such as lead people to a particular feeling, thought and action that would not be stimulated in the same way or to the same extent by seeing or experiencing the reality reproduced. Out of his or own seeing and experience of reality, the artist has made a picture that reproduces their thoughts and feelings and is for us to see and experience.
There's a good phrase for that in German. Der Künstler produziert sich. In other words, an artist doesn't just express himself, he produces himself.
Produziert.
Or produziert sich.
It's a good phrase if you take it to mean that that in the artist, man is producing himself. That it's art when man produces himself.
Am I missing a page?
Do you just want to take mine?
Why
Page 30.
Why am I missing a page?
Should well be. I don't know. You probably are.
I don't.
Page 30.
Right, that's fine. So. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
When man produces himself.
Thank you. But that can't be all that art can do, because it wouldn't be enough. What about the dreams dreamt by dreamers, beauty with an admixture of terror, life on all its different levels?
Yes, it's about time we talked about enjoyment. You may think the whole of philosophy lies in making life more enjoyable, but you seem to want art to be of such a sort that it, of all things, cannot be enjoyed. Eating a good dish you estimate highly, fobbing the people off with potatoes you condemn. But art is to have nothing in common with eating or drinking or love.
Thus, art is a peculiar and fundamental human capacity. Not a disguise for morality or a prettification of knowledge, but an independent discipline that represents the various other disciplines in a contradictory manner. To describe art as the realm of the beautiful is to set about it in too passive and an all-embracing way. Artists are deeply skilled. That is the first point. What makes artificial things beautiful is the fact of their being skillfully made. You may complain that mere skill isn't enough in the creation of art objects, but the expression mere can only refer to a hollow, one-sided kind of skill, which is based on a single artistic field and is lacking from all others, i.e., which is unskillful on the moral and scientific side. Beauty in nature is a quality which gives the human senses a chance to be skillful. The eye is producing itself. That isn't an independent process which stops there, nor is it one that has not been prepared for by other processes, social processes involving other types of production. Where would the mountain's vast sweep be without the constriction of the valley, or the informal form of the wilderness without the formlessness of the great cities? No man's eye can be sated if he's not sated himself, pitched into it without any possibility of making use of it. Anybody who's exhausted or got there accidentally finds that even the most fabulous of beauty spots just has a depressing effect on them. It is the impossibility of any such possibility that is depressing. Untrained people often feel beauty's impact when contrasts grow sharper, when the blue water becomes bluer, the red subjects redder, the golden corn more golden. From the point of view of art, we can say that our progress has been as follows. We've taken those imitations of reality, which releases all sorts of emotions and passions, and tried to improve them without bothering about the latter by arranging them in such a manner that anyone seeing them is put in a position actively to master the reality imitated. We found that more accurate imitations lead to the release of emotions and passions. In fact, that emotions and passions can further the mastering of reality.
There's really no longer anything surprising in the fact that art was almost ruined at first by applying it to a new business, that of destroying men's preconceptions about their life together in society. Nowadays, we can see that this happened because art tackled that new business without abandoning one of its preconceptions about itself. Its entire apparatus was designed for the business of making men accept their fate. The apparatus was ruined when part of man's fate in his new productions was suddenly taken by man himself. In short, it wanted to promote the new business while reminiscing the old art. Accordingly, it did everything in a hesitant, half-hearted, selfish, conscience-ridden way. But nothing suits art worse than this. It was only by sacrificing itself that it became itself again.
I see. What seemed inartistic was what didn't suit the old art, not what didn't suit art in general.
And that's why some people, on seeing the new art so apparently feeble, or rather enfeebled by its new tasks without those tasks having been satisfactorily solved, regretfully turned their backs and preferred to give the new tasks up.
Well, this whole notion of practical definition strikes me as a bit cold and austere. We're merely producing solutions to problems.
Unsolved problems too.
Yes, but in order for them to get solved, that's not life anymore. People may choose to see it as a network of solved or unsolved problems, but problems aren't. They're not life. Life has to be and has to have an unproblematic side too. And there are also things as insoluble problems. I don't want to be restricted to playing charades.
I can understand. He wants to dig deep, a mixture of the expected and the unexpected, the intelligible and the unintelligible. He wants to mix applause with terror, amusement with regret. In short, he wishes to make art.
I can't stand all that talk about art being the handmaiden of society. There sits society, fat and powerful. Art isn't part of her. It just belongs to her. It's simply her skin. Are we all supposed to be a lot of servants? Can't we all be the masters? Can't art become some mistress? Let's get rid of domestic service altogether in art, just as much as everyone else.
Bravo!
What do you mean, bravo? You've ruined everything you've said by that piece of spontaneous applause. All anyone has to do is tell him he's oppressed and you're on his side.
I hope I am. I see what he's getting at now. He's worried we're going to turn him into a civil servant, or a master of ceremonies, or a revivalist preacher operating by artistic means. Cheer up. That's not the plan. The art of acting needs to be treated simply as an elementary human utterance which contains its own purpose. That's where it differs from the art of war, whose purpose is external to itself. The art of acting is one of society's elementary capacities. It is based on a direct social asset, one of humanity's pleasures in society. It is like language itself. It's really a language of its own. I propose we rise to our feet to make this tribute stick in our memory. And now I propose that we should take advantage of the fact that we've risen to our feet and go and relieve ourselves.
Oh God, you've wrecked the whole thing. I protest!
Why? Once again, I'm obeying an instinct, bowing to it, respecting it, and at the same time seeing that the ceremony comes to a suitably banal end.